Last to bloom, but the first to harvest, that's cherries for you. Cherries are the last stone fruit tree to bloom on the farm, but it's the first fruit that we harvest. So the cherries are quick off the block. They take about 40 to 45 days to get ready to harvest. So the flowering of the early harvest varieties of cherries that we have on the farm start towards the beginning of April, and we start harvesting those cherries towards the middle of May. So roughly about 40 to 45 days and the harvest begins. We have on the farm almost about 18 to 19 different varieties of cherries, some early harvest varieties, some mid harvest varieties, and some late harvest varieties, which means that we have extended the harvest period of cherries. We do not want our fruits to come into bearing, to come into harvest all at once. We want to come into the farm and have the fruit dangling from some of the branches every time we step onto the farm. So that is the idea of having different varieties on the farm. We have picking tours on the farm where we have our guests coming in and they want to see cherries also on the farm. They want to do picking, so all those things can happen if we have different cherries getting ready at different times of the year. So this cherry in front of me is called the Frisco cherry, and it's a mid harvest variety of cherry. We already have harvested some of the early harvest varieties of cherries. This one is a mid harvest variety. Most of the trees, most of the cherries that we have on the farm are all 3-year old. They were planted in 2022. This is 2025, and these are very young trees, and they have given us a sample crop, we'll call it. And as samples go, this crop is pretty bountiful, and we can sample the cherries right off the tree because we are organically growing the fruits. So there are two kinds of cherries, the sweet cherries and the sour cherries. The sour cherries are usually dehydrated. They're also used for making jams, but the sweet ones that we are growing, all the varieties that we have, the 18 plus varieties of cherries that we have on a farm are all the sweet varieties, which means that you can simply pick them off the branch and eat them fresh. The sweet cherries are for eating fresh off the branch. Now, are some cherry varieties sweeter than the others? I am not really sure. I am not a cherry connoisseur. If I were one, I would be able to distinguish between one cherry variety and the other. But rule of the thumb over here is, if sweet cherries are going to be the cherries which are going to be darker in color. The cherries are going to be absolutely blood red like this one. This is the cherry which is going to be sweet regardless of what variety of cherry it is. So this one, blood red, is absolutely sweet compared to, say, this one over here, which is sort of orangish, and it will not be as sweet as the cherry that I just picked. So when we go cherry picking, you need to look for, like I said, the blood red cherry. Those are the cherries that are going to be the sweetest regardless of what variety that you're picking from. The other rule of the thumb over here is to pick the cherry in a particular way that you do not damage the spur for the next year. All stone fruit trees, all fruit trees for that matter, have a different picking technique. You cannot pick the cherry the way you pick an apple or the way you pick an apricot. The apricot cannot be picked the way you pick a pear. All of these stone fruit trees need to be picked. All these fruits have their own peculiar picking technique. Now, how do you pick a cherry? Now, the cherry has to be picked along with the stalk. Unlike the apricot you're just going to twist and turn and it comes in your hand. But the cherry, you need to take it out with the stalk like this. The stalk should come clean with the cherry that you're picking. So this way, and now this is the way you will ensure that your cherries remain healthy for longer if you're going to store it, because if the stalk does not come out, if you take it out and the stalk remains on the branch, then your cherries will go bad sooner than if you picked it with the stalk on. But the most important thing for us cherry farmers is that the spur should not be damaged when you are picking the cherries. Now we do a lot of cherry picking tours every year at MeenaBagh Farms, and we are at pains to explain to our guests that please do not touch the spur attached to the stalk. So all that you need to do is go right at the end of the stalk and give it a gentle twist so that the stalk comes clean and the spur remains on the branch, because this is the spur which is going to give you more cherries next year. If you damage this, there will be no cherries next year. So the picking is a delicate business. Once you get the knack of it, it's a really fun activity, especially if you're coming into an organic farm where you can pick the cherries clean off the branch and eat it off the branch immediately, because you know they are grown organically. This particular variety that I am eating off is called the Frisco cherry, and it's a mid-harvest variety. This is the first week of June. We've already harvested, like I said, the early harvest varieties of cherries from mid-May onwards. These that we are going to harvest today are going to be the mid-harvest varieties, and I will show you one cherry which is going to be ready towards the end of June. And this particular variety of cherry is called the Lapin. Now Lapin, as you can see, is not ready at all. It has barely got a tinge of orange on it, and this is going to be ready towards the end of June, which means that we have extended a harvest period from mid-May towards the end of June. Now that's what we want from our farm. We want all cherries, we want the cherry fruits to remain as long as possible on the farm, so that we have a sampling of some cherries on a farm for ourselves and for our guests. Now Lapins, by the way, is a self-fertile cherry. Now, this is one of the 3 self-fertile cherries we have on the farm: Lapins, Stella, and there's one more called the Sunburst. Lapins, Sunburst and the Stella, they are the self-fertile varieties, which means they do not require cross pollination for fertilization. A flower from this particular tree can fertilize itself, but like I keep saying, cross pollination is always the best in terms of getting a good quality of fruit, good size of fruit. So this is Stella, and it's loaded with the cherries which are going to get ready only towards the end of June. Look at them, they're all green, growing almost like grapes. One thing about cherries that you need to remember is that unlike the apricots, plums, your apples and the pears, we do not thin the cherry. The cherries are allowed to grow like grapes. You do not thin the cherries. Now this particular cherry has not produced too many cherries for us this year, but the peculiar thing about the shape of the cherries on this tree is that they're heart shaped. If you look at them a little closely, they are shaped like a heart. This particular variety is called the Sonata. Sonata cherries variety has not borne us, not given us too much of crop this year, and we have a lot more of these heart shaped cherries. These are going to get ready in a couple of days. As I told you, these are going to get ready only when these are going to be picked only when they are blood red in color, not pale orange or pale reddish, because that's when you're not going to get the full flavor of the cherry. Now there's another cherry we have over here. I do not have a label on this, but again this is a heart shaped cherries. I realize that I have a lot of varieties on the farm which are somehow shaped beautifully like a heart. These are the cherries, these heart shaped cherry varieties are the ones that have not really given me a good crop this year. This is not ready yet. These are going to get ready in a couple of days. Not red yet, but you know, when you are picking your cherries, there will be some cherries on the tree which are going to be blood red, some are going to be pale red like this one. So you need to cherry pick, as the word goes, your cherries as you go along. Now the size of the cherries depend on many factors, but one of the factors that can determine the size of the cherry is going to be the variety. Now this particular variety produces cherries which are really very small. Look at these cherries, they're really very tiny, and they're ready for picking, some of them at least, because they have become blood red and they are not really very sweet, though this is not the variety that I'm going to propagate on the farm. Firstly, because the fruit size is very small, and the second is it is not really very sweet. It's not a cherry that I'm going to encourage growing on my farm. So to harvest, you need to go at the base of the stalk and then give it a gentle tug without injuring the spur. Now, this particular variety is called the Black Star. As the name suggests, we have to look for the blackest, the reddest cherry. And this one over here is the blood red cherry, which I'm going to sample for the first time, because last year there was nothing, this tree bore us nothing at all. Very sweet. After the tasteless cherry that I sampled just a while ago from the other tree, this one is really very refreshing. This is the Black Star cherry, and this is also a mid-harvest variety of cherry which we are going to be harvesting in the first and the second week of June. And this is another Frisco variety of cherry we have, and as you can see, they're all blood red, which means that they are ready to harvest. And as I indicated, the harvest of the cherries have to be done in a particular way. The harvest of the cherries have to be picked in a particular way, and they cannot be picked like apples and the pears and the apricots. You need to go right at the base of the stalk and give it a gentle tug, and you get the cherry that you want. And I have three, all of them are ready. This one, very sweet Frisco cherry, the cherry that we are going to propagate a lot more on the farm. And this cherry over here is called the Faravia. This is the Faravia variety of cherry, and this is somewhat of a mixed, mixed harvest variety. Some of the cherries are ready, and some of them, as you can see, are still green, which means that on this very tree we will have an extended cherry harvest. So, do I see any blood red cherry on this one? Maybe this one over here. Sweet, even though it is not fully mature. This is the Firavia cherry. This is a cherry tree where you won't see any cherries because all the cherries are camouflaged among the green of the leaves over here. All these cherries are yet green, they are unripe. So this is a late harvest variety of cherry. It does not have any tag on it, but we know this is going to be harvested later in June. And this particular cherry is again the Black Star cherry, the mid-harvest variety of cherry. Some of the cherries on the branches of this cherry tree are ready to pick, and majority of them, as you can see, still have a couple of days, couple of weeks for them to ripen. And again over here, a mid-harvest variety of cherry that we have is the Regina. The Regina does not really have a good sized cherry, but I'm hoping they are still green. This might swell up and become a little bigger. This is the cherry that again we're going to harvest towards the last week of June. This is the Regina. Cherries on it are still very unripe, they're still very green, as you can see, all very green. Some of them have a tinge of orange, tinge of red on them, but they're not ready to be picked because, like I said, cherries need to be picked when they are blood red. That's when they are the juiciest, that's when they are the tastiest. And this particular cherry is called the Heidelfinger. Now this Heidelfinger is a German name, and how I know this is because we had a volunteer from Germany over here called Tom. Tom, if you're watching this, we remember this tree by you, and Heidelfinger might be a German name, but we got all these cherries from Italy. Now this again, as you can see, the cherries are still very unripe, they're not ripe at all. These are going to get ready also in a couple of weeks from now. So this was the Heidelfinger. And here we have this very small tree loaded with the cherries. This is barely 4 feet something, and these cherries are streaming down the branches of this cherry tree. This is ready, this is blood red. A sweet cherry, not very sweet, not as sweet as say the Frisco cherry or the Faravio. And the other thing if you notice about these cherries is the size of these cherries is not very big. And this cherry over here, this cherry is called the Grey Star, and this is one of the cherries, one of the cherry varieties that has given us their sample, given us the cherries, produced cherries for the first time this year. Now as you can see, this one has very big cherries compared to the cherry tree that we had gone to a while earlier. The cherry is huge and extremely sweet. Grey Star is really very sweet, very yummy, delicious cherry, the Grey Star cherry. And these are the cherries of the variety called the Black Star that we are familiar with. We have already tasted some of the cherries of the Black Star, and they're so yummy that we can come back to it again and again. Now this is the Black Star cherry eaten by the birds. The birds usually go for the cherries that are the sweetest. So no wonder they came to the Black Star and they've done this damage. The problem with the bird is that they don't eat as much as they damage, and they also drop a lot of the fruit. Otherwise they've just left this cherry, they've eaten whatever they could, and they have left half the cherry uneaten on the tree. And this young cherry tree next to the duck pond is also ready for harvest. As you can see, most of these cherries on this tree are also blood red, ready to be harvested. And I don't have a label on this tree as well, but I'm going to sample off the fruit and see how it tastes. Sweet, but not as sweet as Grey Star, not as sweet as Frisco. Now this one over here is early harvest variety of cherry, and the reason that we have cherries on this tree is because we have these cherry picking tours, and we have left the cherries unharvested on this tree for our guests to come and do the tour. Red Pacific, Grey Star, Black Star, these are the cherries which are absolutely delicious cherries, and the size that these cherries have is really very huge compared to the other cherry varieties that we have on the farm. Next to the early harvest variety, the Red Pacific, we have the Black Star over here. Now these are the cherries because they're easily accessible. These are where we have our cherry picking tours because they're easy to access, the branches are lower, and these cherry trees are usually always loaded with the cherries. This one, the early harvest variety, this one, the mid harvest variety. So there's something always for our guests to harvest from the trees. Now this one over here, by the way, is ready. Like I said, some of the cherries on the trees, even if they are late harvest varieties or mid harvest varieties, some cherries get ready before the others, and those can be cherry picked. Look at the amount of cherries on this tree. This is the first year that this tree has given us any harvest at all, and this is loaded with the cherries. Now this is the kind of harvest that we want. We want the cherries to be loaded from the top of the branch to the bottom of the branch. Now this is the stem coming out from the trunk. These are the 3 stems, and all these 3 stems are loaded all the way up to the top with cherries. This is the Red Pacific, and it has produced us cherries for the first time this year, and this is what we can call a bumper crop on this very small 3-year-old tree. Now not all cherries on this tree are ready, but I'm going to sample one of it. Very sweet. The size is not very big, but it's understandable because they're growing almost like grapes on the branches. This one seems ready. And now compared to the red Pacific over there, which is almost ready to be harvested, we have these cherries which are green, which are yet to ripen. And this is a variety that we don't have a tag on this one, but certainly this is a late harvest variety, and this is going to be ready towards the end of June. No, it does not have a tag. These cherries are going to be ready once we have harvested the red Pacific over there. So once we have harvested the red Pacific, these are going to come into being. These are going to take over the farm. These are the ones that are going to brighten the farm. These are going to redden the farm, so to speak. These are the cherries that we're going to harvest towards the end of June. And look at the crop load on this very young 3-year-old tree, laden with cherries. And laden with cherries, and how? Laden with cherries right from the bottom of the stem right till the top. And this has, in my estimation, about 10 kgs or maybe more of cherries. We're going to record that tomorrow and see how many cherries we have of this. This is the Frisco cherry. This is also the early harvest variety of cherries, and it is a prolific bearer, as you can see. And we're going to unburden it tomorrow. If not tomorrow, definitely day after. This is another self-pollinating variety of cherries that we have on the farm. This one is the Stella. We already saw the Lapins, which is also a self-pollinating variety, which means that they do not depend on cross-pollination for fertilizing their flowers. This one is the Stella, and as you can see, this is also a mid-harvest variety of cherry. The third self-fertile variety that we have on the farm is called the Sunburst. So 3 varieties which are self-fertile: the Stella, the Lapins, and the Sunburst. So this was the harvest from this one tree, the variety called the Frisco cherry. And how much do you think have we harvested from this very young 3-year-old tree? I reckon it's almost about 10 to 12 kgs. We're going to weigh this and see it for ourselves. Now these trees, these cherry trees that we have planted, in fact all the trees on the farm, they're only 3-year-old. The cherry trees that we have on the farm, including the Frisco variety, are on a rootstock called the Jezla 5 or the Jezla 6. This one over here, this Frisco variety of cherry that we have, is on a rootstock called the Jezla 6. It's a semi-dwarfing rootstock, and this particular variety, the Frisco variety of cherry, apparently is a prolific bearer. It has borne us almost 10 to 12 kgs in its 3rd year, which is phenomenal, I think. So Frisco cherry is going to be the cherry of choice for propagation on our farm. 10, it wasn't 12, it wasn't 20, it was 9 kgs. And but 9 kgs for a very small tree, 3-year-old tree, growing on a rootstock, the Jezla 6, this was a significant harvest from just one single tree. And we are very happy also with the kind of quality of cherry that we have. Big cherry, the size is not very big, but the color is wonderful, and these cherries, they taste wonderful.